Today's date is March 3rd, 2023. My wife and I think differently, talk differently, and understand the world differently. And that creates interpersonal communication problems between her and I. Interpersonal communication is the exchange of thoughts and feelings, verbally and non-verbally. Peterson, 2022. And so my wife and I have a plan. We call it the Prioritizing Love Agreement, and our plan is to read the book, Why Don't We Listen Better? Communicating and Connecting in Relationships, to read that book together and to, read about 2 to 3 chapters a week and discuss what we've read, and so we can figure out each other's triggers, what makes us flat-brained, what annoys us, and how we need to hear information. And also we'll have a working lexicon to be able to communicate better by sharing a vocabulary that we both understand and agree to. And the second part of the plan is to utilize the talker and listener cards whenever we have an emotionally charged discussion that needs to take place. And we feel that that'll help us develop the habits of healthy and transparent, clear, calm communication. We're going to cover my personal blend from the Uniquely You. And we're going to cover some of my background as who I am as a person. So that's led to some of the barriers in my communication. And we'll be covering the goals and strategies how to implement this plan, the Prioritizing Love plan. The results for my Uniquely You profile showed that I am publicly a high I and privately a high DC. So being a high I publicly means that I think that people want me to be inspiring. I think that they want me to take the center of attention, to motivate them, to generally motivate a crowd and inspire a group of people. And some of the negative connotations of that is that people can see that I make the assumption that I'm arrogant, self-centered, or self-seeking, when in reality, I guess it's a form of masking where I feel like I must project this energy. So because of that, in my background, is because I've spent time I built a national charity, and I've had about 10 years of experience as being an executive. And over the years, I've had to inspire teams, I've had to lead groups, whereas in the past I used to do all the work myself, but that was unproductive. So I had to learn how to delegate and to motivate other people. But at home and privately, which is kind of causes some conflict in communication, I'm still a DC, which means I'm controlling and kind of calculating and too much detail. And I prefer, as Carbell 2008 says, I prefer to work by myself on tasks. And so that causes some friction because my wife sometimes wonders why I'm not more motivational and inspirational at home. And, why am I more private and isolated when I'm at home? So over the years, I've had to also temper my personality. I've had to not be as assertive and not as direct because before I was a high I was a high D, just a driver. And I've had to learn how to temper that. And so sometimes it can be a little awkward when I'm trying to temper my personality, but yet still motivate a team. And that's a brief background on my Uniquely You and some of the barriers I have to communication. The two most significant interpersonal barriers I have to communication are not being able to manage high emotions, my own and others, and then assumptions. Because I'm so much time in leadership, sometimes I can have assumptive nature and I think I already know what people are saying and I don't listen. So when the high emotion happens, it clouds your judgment. As Peterson 2022 claims that high unregulated emotions can lead to what's called the flat-brained tango when you're in interpersonal communication with somebody else. And then those emotions under pressure can become explosive. When I feel that I'm not being listened to, then my emotions go up. And in truth, I'm not being listened to, but that's an indicator that I need to listen to the other person, Peterson 2022. Because in this dialogue, their emotions are high too. When I have to say, hey, you're not listening to me, they're in the same position I am. They just happen to probably have more pressure and they're not able to listen either. And if I'm cognizant of that, then it's an opportunity for me to slow down, stop, and then listen first. Arguing can be a physical habit. I think it's easy to get into the habit of arguing where You can anticipate that a conversation is not going to go well. You immediately start putting up your defenses. And so even before the conversation begins, people are poised physiologically to be in the habit of arguing. A study Nelson 2016 said that if people have good emotions and good feelings and good intentions for the other person, they're way more likely to hear the other person's perspective, to help them understand their own ideas, and to be a better communicator. And that ties right into Peterson, how he claims that by listening, we allow the other person to feel heard and thus helps regulating their emotions. A study put more clearly, going into dialogue with another person with good feelings increases the likelihood that you're going to have effective communication. As I've touched throughout this process, the way we're going to implement it is we're going to read the book, Why Don't We Listen Better? Communicating and Connecting in Relationships. We're going to read it slowly. We're going to talk over it. We're going to reread it. We're going to take turns reading each chapter, and after each chapter discuss what we heard, what we learned, what we do that we don't like, and what we want to do differently. For example, I get angry when I feel like people aren't listening to me. I give advice. My wife shuts down, gets accusatory and defensive, and can't hear what I'm saying, can't hear the nuance of what I'm saying. And through this dialogue while reading this book, we're gonna discover exactly what it is, and those moments when we do get flat-brained, when our listening does shut down, when we forget that our job as man and wife is to help each other be our best selves. Our job is to help the listener or the talker actually understand what they're trying to say. And Peterson 2022 says that the job of a listener is to help a talker understand what it is they're feeling and saying. That's the true job of a listener. Now, another problem that my wife has that's I hope is going to be implemented through this process is she likes to say yes but. Yes but. So we'll be in dialogue, we'll be communicating, and then she'll say yes but, which is actually just a tool for argumentation, Peterson 2022. When you say yes but, you're immediately you're not really acknowledging what the other person is saying. You're acting like you're listening, but really you're arguing. And so we're hoping by implementing the talker and listener cards that we'll be able to both stop our poor habits in interpersonal communication. We're going to use these cards especially with anything important to us, such as problems with children, problems within our companies, problems on how to manage our time with what we want to do. For instance, she likes to ride horses, I like to run. She likes to swim, I like to do CrossFit, but we both want to make time for one another to share sports activities and hobbies. But sometimes, because our time is so limited, this can cause an argument, and I'm hoping that with the talker listener cards, we'll be able to understand what we really feel and what we really need, and be able to manage our time better. My wife and I plan to facilitate a healthy marriage through effective interpersonal communication. The plan is called the Prioritizing Love Agreement. We will understand and use better intercommunication strategies by reading the book Why We Don't Listen Better, Communicating and Connecting in Relationships by James Peterson, and utilizing Peterson's talker and listener cards. We're both very different people, thus our thinking and feeling, communicating approaches differ. But by learning and intentionally practicing the habits discovered through this class, I believe and feel that we will be able to connect on a deeper level. And I'll leave you with a quote from Oscar Wilde. Ultimately, the bond of all companionship, whether in marriage or in friendship, is communication. Thank you for your time.